Okay, well I think we'll do just an overview of the site and kind of the design rationale and where we're at here. So we're standing in our top row of trees, and this is kind of an alley cropping silvopasture situation. So we have rows here of trees that are spaced 23 feet apart on center, and they are each about 220 feet long. So the trees are planted 15 feet apart. The row we're looking at in front of us here, that's a plum row. So what you can imagine long term is sort of canopies touching of those trees. They'll be pruned in a semi-dwarf style. So at 15 feet there'll be a full tree. This row here, for instance, was only tilled once, and so in the center here is tilled. We put heavy chips. We'll dig in and see how things are doing. So we've got worms. So, you know, there's one criticism of tilling that, while I'm sympathetic to, I also understand that they do come back. So that is that earthworms, you know, you're killing the microbiology when you till. And that is true, but when you're doing it in such small quantities here, we just did the strips. Everything else was left untouched. And so while you are disturbing some of those earthworms, when you smother it with chips like this, you come back and sure enough, their populations are skyrocketing, so they're loving this. So if we look in here, this has only been tilled once, and we've just piled it with heavy chips. There's no cardboard, nothing. And let's just see how we're doing. So you can see some decaying grass roots here, but in my eye, they're mostly looking pretty dead, so that's good. There's some wireworm, so that's what we're worried about. Whoops, fell over there, but for the most part, I mean, we're just super fortunate to have this black loam soil. So that's about 4 to 5 inches of wood chips on top of winter tilled soil, early spring I should say, and we're not getting much grass coming up through. If we come over here, you can see, you know, maybe the chips weren't quite as thick. We've got a few little grass roots coming up, usually in their clods that were sort of not picked out when they were tilled. Pretty easy to deal with. Otherwise, we've got dock, which I'm not too worried about, some plantain, and again, tiny bit of grass root coming up. So wood chips can be your friend for smothering grass. And then these grass alleys, they can be, there's a number of options. They can either be mowed, hayed, or grazed, and we really hope to see animals in here in the long term. What we could also do with these alleys is grow annuals in the short term, and that's what we're doing up in the very top. So between our fruit trees and the fence, we've put in a number of different rows, and this will be for field crops. So, you know, anytime you're tilling or transitioning from pasture into field crops, it's going to be a slog for a couple years. There's wireworms. Claire's talked about some of the different pests that'll be there. There's grass. So we're gonna be going slow here with this section, and we're trying a number of different soil preparation techniques. You can see the black poly over there. So that has been hand weeded to the best of our ability, and then we're covering it up, and that's called stale seed bedding. So basically, the tarp brings in the heat, the black attracts the sun, and so things get really moist and hot under there. Weed seeds germinate and they grow for a week or two, and then they die because they don't have light. So that's what that technique is there. We're probably going to do a little bit more of it in some of these other beds, and then we're also going to do a big giant potato sheet mulch. So some of the materials we're using, this is a rotted wood chip material. So it's literally wood chips that has been composted in big windrows. If you get in there, it's really nice stuff. It's chunky, coarse, but also there's some fines. And so we're going to be planting our potatoes right into that with straw and some other compost. This is kind of our main material that we're using here. And then the fresh harvest chips we're using as paths, and we really want to go towards the no-dig method where we have permanent pathways and permanent beds. This field crop area that we're standing in now, we've formed some beds on top, but we also keyline plowed or subsoiled down to about 20 inches, 22 inches on about 18-inch centers. And you can really feel it, like when you walk in here. or when you're prepping the ground, you can tell that it's really been fluffed up and loosened. So we're hoping that that's going to help with the annuals getting their roots down into that heavier, wetter soil and not being bogged down by the plow pan. What you find in fields like this was a horse pasture for a number of years, and there's a rule in horse forage that for some reason you reseed every 5 years. So you till and then reseed, and that has to do with just overgrazing basically and never allowing things to recover. So then the weeds kind of take over because that's not what the animals want to eat, and what that creates is what's called a plow pan. So every time that they till this, if you look back at historical photographs, you can see this whole field got tilled every 3 or 4 years and then reseeded. And when you do that, you create a plow pan about 12 inches below the soil, and that's what the keyline plow can come and just rip up, and it just lifts everything up and busts up that hard pan. So now we'll never be tilling this again. All this work, all this soil prep is 10 years worth of soil prep. We're not doing it again. All this bed forming we've done, all the keyline plowing. From here on out, it's a no-dig garden.